All right, what is up, y'all boys? Spencer back with another lineup preview. This time we got the one and only Nebraska. This is a super exciting team. They brought in the best transfer class probably in recent memory. They're the number 3 ranked team on WrestleStat, on Flow. They arguably had the best transfer cycle, as I mentioned. So this is a team that is going to be right up there with some of the best in the country, right? Are they going to beat Penn State or Oklahoma State? Probably not, but I think third is a really good spot for them, and they're a team that's been getting better every single year. So let's get right into it. Starting at 125, this is kind of a weight where things recently changed for him, right? Cale Lauritsen was the guy this last year. He was a NCAA qualifier, kind of got outclassed at NCAAs, but he's a tough dude. But they brought in Vince Robinson. This guy's a dog. Everyone knows him. Two-time All-American, national champion. Vince is going to be a top 3 or 4 guy every single year without a doubt. So I see no reason why that's going to change this year. He's someone who's probably going to push a guy like Luke Lildahl. So super exciting to see potentially that matchup this year. Vince Robinson came in and he's got 2 more seasons at Nebraska, so he's going to do a lot of damage. He's going to be tough to beat. Moving up to 133, this is probably going to be another year of Jacob Van D, who that's not a bad thing by any means. He's a 2-time All-American. He took 7th twice. Obviously it's his senior year. I'm sure he'd love to push for a title or a higher spot. However, to be honest, I think his ceiling might be capped a little bit, to be honest. I kind of see him as a 6, 7, 8 type of guy again. 133 super crowded. You got Jax, Blaze, right? All those guys. So it's going to be a tough weight class, but I think he could All-American again. So behind Van D, Vince, and Cale at these 125, 133 weights, there's not a ton behind these guys to kind of fill in the empty spots. I potentially think that we might see Cale Lauritsen move up next year once Jacob Van D graduates. We'll kind of see what happens because I don't think he's not going to knock off Vince Robinson. So that's 125, 133. 141, this is where we start getting into a really interesting stretch of weights for Nebraska, because as of right now, it looks pretty light with Jake Hockaday as kind of their presumed starter at 141. That would obviously be a pretty weak spot for a team that's pushing for a trophy. A lot of people are talking about the potential for Anthony Echemendia to potentially drop down to 41 again, which is where he's been the last few years. And we'll talk about the reasons why people are wanting him to drop. But I really doubt that's going to happen. Echemendia has been wanting to move up to 149 for several years. Iowa State has just had a crazy logjam at that position with Jake Frost and Paniro Johnson over there at Iowa State. So him coming over to Nebraska as a senior, I'm sure he told them that this was kind of going to be a condition of his transfer. So I think we see Echemendia at 49, Hockaday at 41, and we'll just kind of see how Hockaday kind of does. Maybe he's an NCAA qualifier kind of at best. So kind of a weak spot there, but they've got a lot of heavy hitters coming up. Like we talked about already, Echemendia, the number 5 ranked guy at 149. We kind of know what Echemendia is. 149 is going to be a weight that is going to be even tougher this year with potentially, maybe someone like Sergio Vega moving up. You've got Caleb Henson coming back. Aiden Valencia, you've got Shane Van Ness, right? This is going to be a super tough weight. Echemendia is tough, very positional, very strong, but I don't see him getting much higher than maybe like a 5th or 6th. If you were to go down to 141, 41 is a lot wider open. I could see him taking a top 3 or 4 place at 141 if he were to go down again. But I really see Echemendia at 49, and I see him maybe like a 5th, 6th, or 7th type of range. So still a high All-American. He's obviously really tough. It's just a super stacked weight class. It's going to be insane this next year. So Moving up to 157. This is the reason why a lot of people are talking about trying to get Echemendia down to 41. It, however, is not going to happen because you've got Antrell Taylor, two-time All-American, two-time finalist, national champion at 157. Antrell's a dog. He's going to be a top 3 guy again this year. And they just recently got Myra Shapiro in the transfer portal coming over from Cornell. This is kind of a crazy one. A lot of people were talking about, maybe Shapiro drops down to 49, Echemendia goes 41, and then they just have a killer murderers row type of lineup. That's not going to happen. However, Myra Shapiro has made it abundantly clear that he is not going to be wrestling this year, and he's taking a red shirt, which tough pill to swallow for Nebraska, right? They're paying him money to be here, and he's not going to be on the mat this year. And he's obviously, a guy who could probably push to win an NCAA title. But he went on Flow Wrestling's podcast and kind of talked about his decision that he made to transfer to Nebraska. And it kind of sounds like, between a combination of the injury scares that he's had, it sounds like he's really kind of had trouble getting himself to really love the sport again. And it sounds like Cornell, he had talked to the coaches a lot about redshirting, and they had kind of waffled a little bit. They kind of really tried to talk him out of it, which, feels a little disingenuous from the coach's side, knowing everything that he's dealing with, to try and, essentially force him to wrestle, as it kind of sounded like they did the last couple of years. It seems like a rough decision. Seems like a rough spot for Meyer. So he's going to redshirt. He's going to take over for Antrell next year. But regardless, 2 really tough guys at this weight. They're going to make each other better. Antrell, I think, is going to probably push to make the finals again. It's going to depend on what side he ends up on the bracket, honestly. If Robidoux and PJ Duke end up as the 1 and 2, he's going to have to get through one of those guys to make the finals again, which I don't see happening. But if somehow those guys end up on the same side of the bracket, which I cannot imagine happening, but that's probably what it would take to get Antrell back to the finals. Otherwise, I see him as maybe like a third place type of guy. And then Meyer, we'll kind of see what happens. Moving up to 165, we've got my guy LJ Araujo. 165, honestly, is a little bit of a weaker weight outside of Mitchell Messenbrink. There's not a lot of other guys there. I really think that he's someone who could make some jumps. I really think this is where Nebraska could score some more points here. LJ Araujo, outside of D. Lockett, Joey Blaze, I think he can move up the podium quite a bit and maybe take like a 3rd or 4th place. So if you think Mitchell Messenbrink's going to win it, probably. D. Lockett is a guy a lot of people are talking about to place high this year. And then Joey Blaze is going to be in there as well. I can see LJ Araujo jumping up to, 5th, 6th, maybe even as high as 4th place. So big weight for LJ. He's super tough. He's only a sophomore. He's got multiple years left. So, I think they're super happy with him. It's going to be cool to see how he does. Up at 174, this guy's kind of the alpha on this team in my eyes. Chris Minto. This guy had a couple really close matches with Levi Haynes last year, who, Levi Haynes, Flow Wrestling has kind of said this. He might very well be the best wrestler in the world at his weight, right? And Chris Minto had some super, super close matches with him. So Minto's a dog. He's a guy. He's the favorite to win a national championship for a reason. We'll kind of see what happens with Penn State at this weight. I kind of talked about this in my other video on Penn State, where they're trying to figure out where Jaden James goes. They're trying to figure out where Mitchell Messenbrink goes. With the new NCAA rule changes, could Levi Haynes be back for a 5th year? Who knows? But regardless, until we get a little bit more clarity on if Levi Haynes is coming back, I think Chris Minto is the guy for this next season at 174. He's going to be the national champion. That's my guess. So obviously they're stacked there. Not a ton in the barrel behind him. If you look at their recruiting class rankings, but they've got him for 2 more years, so they've got some more time to kind of figure out what they're going to do. Moving up to 184, we've got Lucas Cochran, right? We mentioned Penn State. He's a Penn State transfer, right? He's been at Penn State for quite a while. He's a senior. You can't blame these guys for transferring. It's kind of sad to see the guys leave programs, but you can't blame him. He's been a backup at Penn State for years. Now he wants to go out and see what he can do, right? We've always talked about how Penn State's backups could be starters on a lot of teams. And this is a great example of that, right? Lucas Cochran couldn't break the lineup. He was stuck behind Rocco Welsh, Josh Barr, those kinds of guys. And now he's at Nebraska. We've seen that Penn State backups can really be high-quality guys, right? Terrell Barraclough for Utah Valley, All-American a couple years back, and he was really tough for them in a similar move to what Lucas Cochran is doing here. So, is he going to All-American? Maybe. Lucas Cochran is tough, undoubtedly. 184 is pretty deep with a pretty solid top four. It's going to be exciting to see what he can do. He's got a 36-8 record in his career. He's beat Cole Marasola once. He's beat a couple other decent guys like Rutgers heavyweight Yaroslav Slavakuski a couple years ago. But outside of that, not a ton of really high-level wins. I kind of see him as an NCAA qualifier kind of guy. So he might get to the tournament, maybe go 2-2 or something like that. We'll kind of see what he does, but I think he's going to have a good year for sure. Next up, Camden McDaniel. Camden McDaniel is another All-American. He's really tough. Not much to say about him. Just super consistent. They're going to be good there as well. 97 is another really interesting weight, but Camden McDaniel's holding down that spot. At 285, this is kind of where it gets a little interesting, right? Cade Ziola. Cade Ziola is super, super tough. There's a lot of hype here. This is the guy that they effectively said goodbye to AJ Ferrari for, right? And obviously AJ Ferrari is a scumbag. I'll own that. He's kind of a terrible human being, and so they didn't want him on this team. 1 year was enough of him, and that's kind of been the pattern over AJ's career. So, Cade Ziola is someone who I think they can really build and develop, and I think he has a really high ceiling and a really good future. Heavyweight has lost some really tough guys. Trumbull is gone. Younger is gone. Godali is gone. AJ's probably not going to wrestle, in my opinion. Doucette, Zuba at Oklahoma State and Arizona State are all gone. So still a few tough guys there. But there's some solid, there's some solid guys that have left. So between Ben Keeter, Nick Feldman, a couple of those other guys, I think Cade Ziola has the potential to All-American. I think that might be kind of tough to do as a freshman in this weight, but I think he has a really solid season. So overall, Nebraska's lineup is really, really tough. Not a lot of holes, definitely a couple weaker spots, but the guys that they have starting are probably going to be solid starters. So I'll go ahead and kind of give my picks for where I see guys finishing. So Vince Robinson, I'm going to say he takes second is kind of where I think he's going to go. I think he's going to lose to Luke Liddell in the finals. Like I said before, I think Jacob Van D, I think he takes 7th, maybe 8th. I do think he All-Americans again, but 133 is super deep. Hockaday, I think he's someone who could probably make the NCAA tournament at best, but that's probably about his ceiling. Maybe we see him go 1-2 or 2-2 type of thing. Echemendia, I'm going to say, at 149, I'm going to say he regresses a little bit and takes something like 7th or 8th, maybe as high as something like 5th. But I'm gonna be a little bit conservative because it's such a tough weight and say 7th. Antrell Taylor, kind of already gave my pick for him. I'm gonna say 3rd. LJ Araujo, I think he jumps up to maybe a 4th or 5th type of placing. Minto, I think, makes the finals and probably wins it unless Levi Haynes comes back. So potential for a national champion there. Lucas Cochran, I'm going to say NCAA qualifier. Camden McDaniel and Cade Ziola. McDaniel, I think All-Americans again. Ziola, I'm going to say he's a blood round type of guy. So really solid. So let's count that up. Camden McDaniel, Chris Minto, Antrell Taylor, LJ Raujo, Echemendia, Vandy, and Robinson, right? That's 7 All-Americans. That's an insane team, guys. 7 All-Americans is a ridiculous amount. I think they're going to have a crazy tournament. I think they're going to have a crazy year. They're well coached. This seems to be a team that every single year is just super close and united and drama-free. They're a super, super good team, and I'm excited to see what they look like in 2026, 2027. Let me know what your thoughts are. If maybe I said something completely wrong, I could be totally wrong on some of this stuff. So let me know. Take care. Bye.